Congratulations on Harry Bird.
Well, thank you very much.
Tell me a little bit about growing up and then many years later going back to shoot in the Elephant and Castle section of London.
Yeah, well, I grew up, and I always said I come from the slums, which I do, and that was. But when I went back, I didn't realise how lucky I was, because when I talked to the boys there, after when we were shooting like late at night, I'd get the real boys out from there, who would normally be quite scary, but with me they were fine, because I was one of them, even though I was an old man and they were young kids. And what I realised was I was very lucky, because I had two things they didn't have. I had a very happy family life, and I got an education. I mean, I didn't go to Oxford. I went to grammar school. I got the 11 plus and scholarship, they used to call it. And the other, I had two things, very valuable things that they didn't have, and one thing I didn't have that they did have, which was drugs. We didn't have drugs and drugs are the basis of just how feral they have become, and that because it in the end it wipes out all feeling for the other person, because it has to. I mean, there's a sequence in there where I go to buy a gun off two drugs. I mean, those two people are, unfortunately, all very real in that world, and there are lots of them.
Well, the young men that are in the film come from that background as well. A lot of them
do, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I noticed that when they were given direction, they were very keen to listen and do it right. And if someone had only told them something, I mean, maybe it's woodwork, never mind about direction, or something, they would have listened and done it right. But we've neglected a massive generation of young people, really have.
Well, in the film, the violence is so stark. I mean, the violence to me looks like real violence. It doesn't look like movie violence.
Yeah, well, that's the point. This is not a violent film. It's a film about real violence. A violent film is you see the knife go across and the blood come out. There's none of that. There's none of that. But it's about how it happens. I mean, read your newspaper and you'll see every single incident in this film.
Well, we've been hearing on this side of the Atlantic, we've been hearing stories about stabbings and beatings and things. And it seems just in the last few years, there's been this whole rise of hooliganism that, I mean, maybe always existed on some level there, but it seems to be much more...
Oh, no. One of the reasons I made this film is as a warning. It's there and it's getting worse. And if the authorities like to look at it and listen, but I mean, they'll say, well, it's not like that. We're pulling the... They can say a bit it's not like that, because where we actually shot the movie, in those flats, those apartments, they're coming down. There's £2.5 billion being spent at the Elephant and Castle. But where are you going to move them to, who came out of there? And I asked a councillor, he said, as far away from each other as possible. So you're also breaking up, not only gang, you're breaking up a social mode, So it's a very, very negative thing, but I think it's scary because I don't think they've got a hang of it, and I think they're scrubbing it, pushing it under the table. And I think we might get into a bit of trouble in England pulling it out from under the table. They might hit at us, yeah.
Well, I used to live in a neighborhood that had one bar that was particularly bad, and it was where all the bad guys hung out. And there were, city protests like, let's close this bar down, let's get rid of it. And the police were quite open, saying, you know what, as long as that place is open, we know where all the bad guys are.
Is. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, but the problem is, the moment in my country, not only do they not know where all the bad guys are, they don't know how many there are, and they're getting bigger. That's the problem. If they had the control that you had in your thing, where they knew all the bad guys are, you wouldn't want to make this movie, because it would be redundant. Right. Now it's kind of scary.
Do you see a parallel at all to earlier characters of yours? I'm thinking of Jack Carter. Harry Palmer.
No, Harry Palmer wasn't a soldier. See, this is a soldier. Mm-hmm. Jack Carter wasn't a soldier. He was a villain and a killer. The whole point about Harry Brown is that he's an innocent old man. And he's forced to do this. And he's a victim, not a perpetrator. And there's one line in it, the policeman one of the police says, "I think Harry Brown killed these 5 guys." He said, "What are you, nuts? He's 76-year-old and he's got emphysema." But he did do it, you know, and he had to do it. He's a victim. We're all victims of it, and you know, it's got to be stopped.
Well, it's interesting because it's not. When I first heard about this movie, I thought, is it a British death wish? Is it, you know,
Well,
is it a vigilante movie? But it's not really.
It's not like that at all. No. It's complete work on its own. I first saw, this is a young director, this is his first feature film, Daniel Barber. And the first film I saw of his, the only film I saw of his, was the Tonto Girl, which got an Academy nomination for short films. It didn't win, but it got an Academy, and I liked it, and it was a Western. And this is kind of like a Western. It's a Western. It's Gary Cooper in High Noon, that sort of thing, going out. And then there's another thing, and I like young directors, especially those who've worked in commercials, because they have all those tricks and ways of doing things that the old directors don't have. So that when you get in a fight, suddenly he has all this stuff that goes on. And then the music is chosen by a disc jockey called Pete Tong. And you go, yeah, that's it, yeah. And that's what I loved about it, yeah.
Well, it's interesting for me to hear you talk with such passion about this film. You've been making movies for so long. You announced that you were going to retire a few years, or we had heard that, but you've still been making movies. And I have to tell you, and quite honestly, I love the work you're doing now.
Well, thank you.
And, you know...
Well, the thing with this movie is it changed me.
And how so?
In as much as I started out, let's go out and make a film about killing all these scumbags. Right. And then I met these people and realised they were helpless just as much as the victims. Right. And they'd been neglected and they needed help, you know, which would be a very unpopular thing. We're going to help a load of killer junkies, you know, put them in prison. Prison doesn't do anything.
No, it just teaches them how
to be clever.
Yeah. Daniel, your director, was telling me that of your iconic status in Britain, I guess that's the only way that I can describe it. He said Michael Caine is probably the only person in Britain that everybody loves.
I don't know. They said, well, you're an icon now. I said, well, I don't know how to do that. I said, because there's no lessons, you know, and there's not a special icon bar where you all go and meet up and ask what you're supposed to do. I said, you call me an icon, now I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
So do you just consider yourself a working actor?
I consider myself lucky. I've been lucky, yeah.
Mr. Caine, thank you so much.
Thank you,
a
sir.
real pleasure to have
a
the chance to speak to you. Thank you. And thank you.